We start in Europe now, where Russia launched another prolonged drone attack on Ukraine in the early hours of June the 10th, killing 2 people in Odesa and damaging swathes of Kyiv, as well as striking a maternity ward in the southern port of Odesa, according to regional officials. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged Kyiv's Western allies to respond with concrete action. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha also called for immediate new sanctions and air defense systems. Here's what the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesperson said.
Андрій Сибіга опублікував свій заклик до міжнародної спільноти в зв'язку з цими варварськими ударами. Насамперед, заклик дуже простий – посилювати тиск, санкційний тиск на Росію вже зараз, нічого не чекати, немає вже часу для будь-яких зволікань, необхідно вводити нові, сильні санкційні пакети, європейські, американські, тиснути всім гуртом на Москву, бо без цього тиску вона, очевидно, не збирається обирати мир, а лише продовжувати.
The overnight strikes came as Russia's biggest drone assault on Ukraine on June the 9th, which is part of stepped-up operations that Moscow said are retaliatory measures for Kyiv's recent attacks on Russian air bases and bridges. At least 4 people were hospitalized in Kyiv as a result of the hours-long attacks that hit 7 of the city's 10 districts, according to city officials. Ukraine's Air Force said Russia had fired 315 drones across the country, of which 277 were downed. All 7 missiles launched by Russia were also brought down. Moreover, the Russian Defense Ministry has said that it carried out the strikes on military targets in Kyiv with high-precision weapons. Russia's Defense Ministry has said that it intercepted or destroyed 102 Ukrainian drones overnight across various regions in Russia. Russia's transport agency, Rosa Viatsia, also said that flight operations had been temporarily restricted at more than a dozen Russian airports. In the city of Belgorod, Russian emergency services said 1 person was killed in a Ukrainian drone attack on a petrol station. We're now joined by our guest today, Professor Veselin Popovsky, Professor and Vice Dean of Jindal Global Law School in New Delhi, India. Thank you very much, Professor Popovsky, for joining us on the program. First of all, these strikes coming from both sides.
I spent my life abroad most of the time. I was in New York, by the way. I worked for the United
strikes
Nations.
From both sides. I believe we're having some technical issues here. Professor Popovsky, are you aware that... Okay, we move on.
Life after
to the Middle
I was a
East.
Bulgarian diplomat.
We have some breaking news coming in now, where Britain will join Canada, Australia, New Zealand and others to slap sanctions on 2 far-right Israeli ministers, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, over their role in the Gaza conflict, as according to a report by the Times of London. The sanctions include asset freezes and travel bans and will be implemented in coordination with Canada, Australia, New Zealand and other partners. Ben-Gvir, Israel's national security minister, is a West Bank settler, while Smotrich serves as the country's finance minister. The move is part of growing international pressure on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government to lift the blockade on humanitarian aid into Gaza, where experts warn that famine is looming. We're now joined by Professor Popovsky to discuss further on the Russia-Ukraine war. Professor Popovsky, thank you very much for joining us on the program. We're seeing this war escalate every single day, more drone strikes on either side. Every day it seems like we see the biggest drone barrage since the war began, as a headline. What are your thoughts on what's currently going on the battlefield? Obviously, Russia is claiming retaliation due to Operation Spider's Web, which happened a few days ago. What are your views on the current state of the battlefield in the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
Indeed, it's very nasty what Russia does. It's not retaliatory. They started the war 3 and 4 months ago, 3 years and 4 months ago. It is a Russian aggression against Ukraine and Russian refusal to accept a ceasefire. There won't be any airplanes hit by Ukrainians if Russia did accept a ceasefire, at least the minimal 30-day ceasefire, which everybody, United States, European allies, Ukraine, expected Russia to agree on a ceasefire. Russia disregarded that. They continue bombing cities. It's mostly they bomb cities. They have no other options left there apart from killing civilians. It's very clear that Russia is the aggressor. Russia commits war crimes every day, especially the last days. And they don't negotiate. They don't agree on ceasefire. They simply continue to fight. It seems that for Russia, this war is the only option, and they are not giving up. The response should be very strong from everywhere, from the Europeans, from everybody. Everybody in the world, including in the global south, should do the same. Sanctions on Russia, support for Ukraine, no negotiations with Putin. Three very clear messages to everybody in the world.
Yes, and Dr. Popovsky, we're seeing Ukraine still call for further sanctions against Russia. Are sanctions really an effective means of countering Moscow at this point of the war? Are they going to be an effective move against Moscow?
Sanctions are effective if they are global. Remember when Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, United Nations imposed sanctions on every single import or export on Iraq. And it did work. Iraq couldn't develop weapons of mass destruction for the next 12 years. Iraq was disarmed by the sanctions of the United Nations. The problem is exactly that the sanctions on Russia are not universal. Big countries in the south do not care about those sanctions. They continue to buy oil and gas from Russia, effectively making sanctions useless, exactly because Russia still can export oil and gas. If every country in the world impose sanctions on Russia, they will be very effective. Putin has no other option to get any money out of anything else apart from oil, gas, and some resources he exports. So it's really sanctions will be effective exactly when every country in the world imposes them. And that's where they work. Otherwise, if only Europeans and Americans and a few other countries, Japan, North Korea, Australia, impose sanctions. And it's kind of very cynical to say European sanctions do not work from countries in the global south who support Putin with their trade. Simple.
Yes, and finally, Dr. Popovsky, we've obviously seen both sides escalate their conflict. We did see Operation Spider's Web as well occur just a week or so ago. What does that say? What does it say about Ukrainian military capabilities? We continue to see Ukraine strike within Russian territory. What are your thoughts?
Yes, Ukraine did what is a masterpiece. It will be studied in the future military manuals in the next century, what Ukraine did on the 1st of June, hitting all four big airspaces which contain 41 destroyed ballistic long-term delivery system, and it's very significant. It's a quarter of the Russian long-term strategic missiles delivery system. So it's a very huge success in terms of military capability of Russia being destroyed with a single day hit on the 1st of June. Ukraine can do more of this, obviously. You see, they are not much in the news, but Ukrainians did hit later several other military objects in the Russian Federation, and they will continue destroying, for example, Iskander, the missiles depot in Bryansk. They destroyed some military equipment in a train, hitting a train. And daily, by the way, Ukrainian drones hit military targets. That's the difference. Russia bombs civilian targets, big cities. Ukrainian destroy only military target. In that 1st of June hit of the airplanes, there was no single civilian casualty. Ukrainians do follow the rules of war, the Geneva Conventions, And Russia, exactly in the opposite way, targets only civilian objects and tries to get some benefit out of this. And unfortunately, Donald Trump administration still is hesitant and doesn't offer full support for Ukraine and doesn't impose massive sanctions on Russian Federation. So there is still a lot to do. As I mentioned, sanctions on Russia, support for Ukraine, no negotiations with Putin. Those three are necessary for this tragedy to end.
Yes. Dr. Veselin Popovsky, thank you very much for joining us on the program.